Welcome to Stump's Hot Rods. Today in this video, I'm going to show you some of the Fender Fitment patch fitment. I'm showing you right now the edge that I need to straighten out on the patch itself. Actually did that surface right there needs to be bent down some more to contour and fit the space, the rear brace inside the fender. The only way that this can be accomplished is by putting some relief cuts in there so that you can bend the one section and keep the other section straight. So I'm just feeling the edge right now, trying to figure out where I want to slice it. So one of the cool things I did here in this section right there is I have a vise and I bolted it to the floor. At one point I was going to put a lift in my garage, so I drilled out some holes in the concrete and cemented some anchor points to the concrete. That never happened because it wasn't going to work in my garage, so I have these cemented inserts, threaded inserts there. So I took one of those threaded inserts and put a bolt through there and put my vise right there. So right now I'm making a relief cut, and the relief cut's gonna allow me to bend one section of the metal independent of the other, because they won't bend in conjunction, and neither should they, because you'll wind up with some distortions in one side versus the other. So if I put a relief cut in there, I can flatten out the side on the left there that you see, and then turn up the bottom. So right now I'm going to hammer out flatten out the side there, because that needs to be totally flat. What's good is that this bench vise here has a flat surface for hammering. It's great if you have smaller pieces, but as you can see, I'm struggling a little bit with trying to get this piece of metal on there. So I had an idea, and use this idea as you see fit. So what I wound up doing is getting a body dolly from the hammer and dolly set that I have, and it will fit. Most of them will fit inside the jaws of your bench vise. So what I wound up doing is clamping that down into the vise, and that actually gives me a raised surface, especially when I'm working on, I don't have to have, the vise won't interfere with the surfaces and the metal that I'm trying to, hammer out on. So right now you can see I can fit that corner on very nicely, because there's a corner on the dolly itself, and that'll allow me to hammer out all the way up to that corner where I cut the relief cut in, and then move the metal all along the edge of that dolly to get it nice and straight. It takes a little trick to get the metal held on there. I'm sure you could clamp it, but the advantage to having this on the floor is that you can lean over and put your weight upon it and keep the metal in place while you're working it. So take your time. This is not something that you can just hurry up and slam your hammer against it and be done with it. one of the things I was taught when you're working with metal is not to go crazy with your hammering. You don't have to really swing the hammer extremely hard. So right here I'm taking the bottom of the fender, and you see now I'm trying to bend that up so that it'll make contact with my frame, the inner frame inside the fender. In the 57 Chevy, this skin actually welds to that frame. So this patch panel, as most patch panels are, wasn't exact and didn't have the proper curve that I needed to fit there. So I wound up, see here I'm showing you how I flattened out the side there. It looks really straight, nice and flat. And then I was able to turn up the bottom and get that more close to a 90-degree or angle than it was currently, because it was pretty far off. So when you're working with this, you're gonna test fit your piece multiple times and until you're happy with what you're doing there. So right here I was pretty excited after doing that work on where I was with hammering and getting that edge. So now I'm just test fitting it, and what I really wanted to do is make sure that the bottom makes contact with the brace well, and that it will sit there in the brace and be able to be welded to that brace, because that's going to provide a lot of the rigidity to your fender. And if you don't have some of these clamps, like I got these they're like vice grips, but they have two you can weld between them. Basically, they're welding clamps, but get a couple of those. These are very helpful. So I was just showing you how the other spot on the fender, what I didn't also like on this patch panel is that the wheel well arch there wasn't arched down enough, because that's just the way the panel was made. So I'm eventually going to have to take that and put another relief cut at the bottom there, and then bend that edge down so that it matches more of the contour of the original fender. So here we are, clamping up, checking the fitment, and I'm not ready to bend that edge quite yet, because as you can see I overcut, I left a lot of meat in the patch panel so I could get it fitted to where I like, and then I'll decide where the final cut's going to be in my patch there, because the final cut, I don't want it to be really gappy. I do want to do a butt weld to it, and I think that the butt weld is probably the stronger instead of a lap weld. I don't want to have to use too much filler, but right there I showed you where I'm going to have to cut the patch panel to fit it up to the original fender. Like I said before, it takes a lot of messing around to get your fitting. I recommend this because I'm going to scribe the backside, and I recommend a marker like that. It's got a very, I think they call it a high nub marker, and it's great for tracing holes, and it's also great for doing things like I'm doing here, which I'm scribing the cut line on the back of this patch panel. It's a small enough tip, but big enough so that you can see it, and also it gets into spots where if you have a fat marker, the body of the marker will get in the way and kind of distort where your line is going, whereas you can get straight up to the edge with this marker. and get a really good cut line set. So what I tried to do here is I tried to, even though there's the brace, Fender brace, the frame, Fender frame or whatever you want to call it, behind this patch, I just scribed as much as I could so that I could get most of the cut line right. So I wanted to be sure that it was tight enough. I don't know that I liked the way that I scribed it. So I moved the clamps around some so that I got it to where it was where I liked it. So here I am scribing the rest of the line. Let's take the clamps off now and see what we got. So I got a cut line there. You can see I left a generous amount of metal. That spot that I just showed you was the place where the fender frame is. You see it right there in the picture. You can also see there on the frame itself the brace that I had to weld a nut on there so that I could that's where the mounting bolt goes on the bottom of the frame, and then that goes through the frame of the car into the fender and secures the bottom of the fender. So I wasn't too sure if my cut line was gonna be sufficient. So here I'm getting some cardboard, and what I mean by be sufficient is that there was a gap there where the fender frame covered the patch panel. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to scribe it onto a piece of cardboard, and then it's the same mark as you'll see on the patch panel itself, but I'm going to then cut this piece of cardboard and cut it to where I like the curvature of the patch panel here. I didn't do a straight line on this patch panel, as you can see. Maybe in hindsight that might have been easier just to do pick a straight line across the fender and do that. But you know, I didn't think that far ahead. So when I'm cutting the cardboard in that spot that I have to now trim down and guess, I left a generous amount of cardboard there so that I could get that to where the fitment was what I liked, because I didn't want it to be gappy, and I didn't want to fill it in with a bunch of weld. So this was the best way that I could figure out to get that section of metal to match up and contour to what I wanted it to be before I made the cut, because what they always say, measure twice, cut once. Well, and when you're doing fitment like this, it's better to do multiple measurements and get yourself real comfortable so that you get the best fitment that you can with your patch panel. So I had to move this around a bit because I had to slide it back and forth. I probably should have made marks on the corners, on the edges in hindsight. So where the edge of the fender ends on the left corner, and then where the edge of the fender ends on the right section. That way I could properly place that when I kept going back and making cuts with my scissors. but I was able to figure it out and get it to where I wanted to, because then what I'm going to do here is keep cutting the cardboard, get that shape close to perfect, and then you'll see. But I messed around with this for quite a while. Take your time. And also, when you're gonna lay it back down on your patch panel, the orientation is important too. You see I flipped it over. So, but if I would have marked both edges, even in thinking back now, you flip that over, you're still gonna be guessing a little bit. But at this point, I was pretty happy with the fitment. So I filled in the rest of that cut line. Thank you for watching today's episode. New one to come soon. Appreciate y'all.